In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
There is something about a quiet stage that tells you the truth. Tonight, there is no guest besides me. There is no one scheduled to walk through that door. And you know what? That is not a loss. That is a calling. Because tonight, the story that needs to be told is too urgent, too sacred, and too long overdue to wait on anyone else. So here I am, just me, this camera, and the full unfiltered truth of where Black America stands in 2026. Welcome to America in Black and White. I am your host, Charles Zachary King, and tonight I carry this one alone. There are nights in this work when you sit on the green room and the chair across from you stays empty. A guest cancels, plans falls through, the world intervenes, and for a lesser show, that would be a problem. But for this show, for this mission, an empty chair is not a setback. It is a signal. And tonight, as we go through and we talk about this signal, it is God, the ancestors, and the moment conspiring together to say, son, they don't need a guest tonight. They need you. They need someone who has been in those communities, someone who has sat with the grieving mothers, walked in the returning citizens, broken bread with entrepreneurs who are building something from nothing. Tonight, that voice is mine, and I'm honored, humbled to bear it. When I look at the landscape of Black America in 2026, I see two things simultaneously, and I refuse to let go of either one of them. I see extraordinary, the innovation, the resilience, the brilliance, the joy, the culture-shaping power of a people who were never supposed to survive and let alone thrive. And I see the wounds still open, still bleeding, still ignored by too many of the halls of power. The wealth gap has not closed. The school to prison pipeline still runs. Gun violence still ravages communities that the cameras leave when the story goes cold. Political promises are made on our backs and broken on our time. We're not post-racial. We're not post-struggle. And on a night like tonight, I will not pretend otherwise. This is the state of Black America, and I'm going to speak every word of it into the record. But I also want to remind you and myself who we come from, because running through my veins tonight is the spirit. It's the spirit of the ancestors. And in the closing of this episode, I'm going to honor one of the most electrifying, most controversial, most necessary voices that Black America has ever produced. El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. The world knew him as Malcolm X. And whether you agree with every word that he ever said or not, you cannot deny that he loved Black people with a ferocity that shook this nation to its core. Tonight, his legacy is the foundation on which we close, because a man who died fighting for our dignity deserves to be remembered, not in a whisper, but in a roar. So this is the episode I was born to make. Not because a guest fell through, but because sometimes the preacher has to stop waiting for the choir and simply open his mouth. Tonight, the state of Black America will be named, analyzed, mourned, celebrated, and challenged right here in front of God and everybody. This is America in Black and White, Season 4, Episode 109, and I am Charles Zachary King. Let's go to work. I want to thank each and every individual that's here, that's watching. I appreciate you all so much, and I'm glad that those that have been with us from the beginning up to this point. I appreciate you more than you can ever imagine. So as we get into this, I want you guys to take the time to please make sure that not only you're listening, but I would appreciate it if you all will, if there's any commentary or anything you'd like to say to me, please put it in the comments and we'll go from there. So let me begin where the foundation lives, in the economy. In the economy. That's first and foremost. Because everything else we talk about tonight, education, safety, political power, mental health, all of this shaped by whom controls the money and who doesn't. And the data in 2026 is still telling us a story that should make every American uncomfortable. The racial wealth gap between Black and white households in this country remains amongst the widest of any measurable divide in our society. Black home ownership rates continue to lag behind their white counterparts by nearly 30 percentage points. A chasm that was carved open by redlining, exploitive lending, and generational dispossession, and that has never been fully repaired. When we talk about wealth inequality, we're talking about choices. We're talking about a system that was designed deliberately and consciously to keep Black families from building the kind of intergenerational wealth that turns a family's fate around forever. And yet, I need you to hold both of these truths at the same time. Black entrepreneurship in America is growing at a rate that defies the odds stacked against it. Black-owned businesses are increasing year over year. Black consumers represent over $1.6 trillion in annual spending power. Black innovators are building technology companies, healthcare platforms, real estate portfolios, and global brands from communities that were told they had nothing to offer. The hunger is there. The talent is there. The brilliance has always been there. What is still missing, stubbornly, shamefully missing, is equitable access to capital. Bank loan denial rates for Black business owners remain disproportionately high. Venture capital flowing to Black founders remains a fraction of a fraction. We're building empires with one hand tied behind our backs. Now imagine what we do when both hands are free. Wealth gap. We're going to talk about this wealth gap first, because when we talk about economics, we need to talk about what's happening in the Black household. And what's happening is that wages have staggered primarily here in America, especially for Black families and Black employees, at a rate that's unbelievable. As the wage gap has stayed staggered, the wealth gap between Black and white has gone this high and is still rising. So as it's rising because what's happening is that those that don't look or that are not Black are getting raises, they're getting benefits, they're getting opportunities to continuously increase the wealth and the values in their households where Blacks are not. Now, we know that now is a time to where we have to always, and we should have always been thinking about entrepreneurship. Because entrepreneurship is where everything is, and it's what is being done. So when we think about this wealth gap, I want you to think about this. You're a Black mother and a Black father. And let's just put it on this on a basic level. And let's say, you've got a working mother and father. They don't have a professional job, but they're making, let's just say, there's one that's making a gross salary of $50,000 a year. The other is making $40,000 a year. Annually, that gross income it comes to $90,000. With that $90,000 and having 3 children, you can't possibly support that household fully because something has to go missing. And what's lacking is not that this family is not working to make themselves better, but it's the fact of knowing that they're working for survival. So as they're working for survivor, to survive, then you got this company that's benefiting off all this labor. They're keeping these profits, but they're asking these employees to do more. Now that sounds like something that most of us can say happens all the time, but that does not make that right. Because if a company is really benefiting off the labor of its employees, then I would think that if you want to continuously to have a successful company, then that means that you would do right by your employees. So what that means is that when you get to this situation that you've got people that need more money, they're working longer hours and still getting lesser pay. That's wrong on all levels. We could talk about more morality. We could talk about lawfully. We could talk about many, many ways that this is wrong, because what you have to remember, we know that companies are here to do one thing, and that is to make money. They're here for profit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the American way, supposedly, quote unquote. Capitalism is what they call it. So just think about this in this process. When we talk about wealth gap, the median white family wealth is approximately 7 to 8 times greater than the median of Black family wealth. This disparity has persisted for decades Despite economic growth in the broader economy, we must name it as the structural consequence. It is not a personal failure. And the reason why we're calling it that is because, no, it's not a personal failure, you know. But when we talk about skills and we talk about the things that people need in order to survive, that means that when they go out and they do this labor, they're supposed to benefit from that labor with these wages. But that's not the way it works. You see, the gap between wages and labor are just like the wealth gap itself, because this is you putting in that labor. That wealth gap is here, but your income is here. So with that, how dare you think that you're going to get ahead, because you're not. You're not. This is why I mentioned in this opening dialogue about entrepreneurship, because Black entrepreneurship is up astronomically. And, you know, they're always talking about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Excuse me. So if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, then what that means is when you go out and you create your own lane, you don't have to worry about that. But when you're going out and you create your own lane, what you're going to have to do is you got to remember that if you're going to go out there, you're going to step out on that faith, because you know what you're capable of, you know what your value is, you know what you bring to the table. Just when you do that, you got to be mindful of a few things. That main thing is this: nobody knows everything. Just make sure that there are reliable sources to help you to continue to move forward in that path. Excuse me. And so the thing is, when we talk about this wealth gap, you know, this is very important, because most parents can't afford to, Black parents can't afford to send children to college. They can't afford to pay for a lot of these certification programs, which is why these kids need to know what programs they can get into that's going to keep them debt free. Because colleges and universities have gone over the top with pricing. Pricing is extremely high now, going to most of these colleges and universities. And it's not about, oh, well, you know, this is just the way it is. This is what they're doing because they're making more money off of you than you can ever imagine. Which for some, they say, college is just not worth doing. And in most cases, they're right. The next thing we're going to talk about is home ownership. Home ownership in Black America is down. That's right, it's down. And we know it's going to be down at about right now anyway, because of interest rates. Interest rates are so high that even if you've got good credit, you're still paying more than usual for a down payment or whatever goes with the essentials of closing on your deal. Home ownership in the Black communities, they hover around 44 to 46% compared to approximately 73 to 74% for white households. Home ownership is America's primary wealth building engine. When Black families are locked out of that engine, the wealth gap becomes self-perpetuating across generations. That means that if your parents can start it out to create assets in a real estate portfolio, then that means that 9 times out of 10, you, the person, the child, or the person that's going to receive that benefit as your parents phase out, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Now, the thing that most will say is you need to be saving your money. Let me tell you about that, because putting your money in banks, especially the banks that they want to hold your money, that are not giving you a loan, I wouldn't suggest putting money in a bank that's not going to give you a loan. Because if they're not going to give you a loan, why should you let them hold your money? Why should you let them hold your money? You should not. You should not. Because we're talking about stimulating the economy, creating growth in the economy. But you have situations like this that takes away from it. I'm going to say to you, and I mean this, is that, the state of Black America right now at this point, where we've got this serious problem with the wealth gap, we've got this serious issue here with home ownership. All of this is leading to one thing, and that is stimulating the economy in the right way. And we'll get further into this, because I just want to put these pressure points out here in the beginning, because you need to understand also that if this economy was working for you, we wouldn't be having this issue, nor would we be having this discussion. We would not be having it. But it's very important that we have this, because our communities do matter. Our communities do matter, and we have to make it work. We have to unify, and we have to take that $1.6 trillion spending power that we have. We've got to take that, and we've got to invest that in our communities. That would help to create this gap, fill this gap when it comes to home ownership, and giving people the opportunity and giving them the chance to learn not just about financial literacy, but how to create these portfolios with real estate assets that are going to be on the continuing growth trajectory. Because that's what we need to be doing. That is what we need to be doing. We need to unify over these kind of situations, because we have to make it better. Nobody else is coming to do it. We have to make it better. We've got to get away from folk trying to create distractions that they're throwing not just within our communities, but with different individuals that are causing serious uproars that are holding us back. They're holding us back. So I want to talk next about the real engine, the thing that's really putting the fuel into the fire, and that is Black entrepreneurship. Black entrepreneurship is like at a rate that you would just not believe. Black-owned businesses have shown resilience and growth, but access to SBA loans, venture capital, and angel investment remains disproportionately inequitable. Black founders receive less than 2% of venture capital funding annually, a number that should shock every person in this country. So now you got venture capitalists out here that are investing money into all these new businesses, but they are not doing it with Black businesses or Black owners, Black entrepreneurs. Ask yourself this question: why is that? Do you think it's got anything to do with the political climate today? Because what's happening right now is that, it seems like this is what it looks like. And so if anyone begs to differ, you can tell me something better. I would appreciate it. But what it looks like to me is that as long as there's the keep away from Black people, despite what you do, what industry you're in, and you're keeping the money away, you're keeping away the growth. You're keeping away the generational wealth. You're keeping those opportunities away because of whatever. So I'm just asking, what is the problem here? Why is it that, when it comes to Black entrepreneurship, why is there such a staggering number that is so low that we can't get SBA loans? You can't say we all have bad credit, but that's something for us to think about, because I'm telling you, this happens with unification. Unification. That's the word of the night. Unification. Unification, because I'm telling you, together we stand, divided we fall, but the structure that we put together when we are together is like none other. That in itself puts you back in control. So I want to talk about the labor force disparities. Black unemployment consistently runs at approximately double the rate of white unemployment, a pattern that has held through recessions and recoveries alike. So this is not a coincidence, it's a structural reality that requires structural solutions. So it don't care about the economy being weak, it don't care about the economy being strong. Black unemployment, or the disparities in Black employment, have always been the same, and sometimes they grow, and a lot of times they just go back to equilibrium, a break-even point. We've got to do something about this, because this is not helping, it's hurting. And so what I do know is that I have a comment here in the chat from Limitless Living. And let me just put this on the screen, because this looks pretty interesting. It says that, I know growing up, I was never taught passive income or how opening up a business can benefit me or the advantages of opening a business. You're right. We didn't have access to the banks or financial institutions because we didn't know how to get those loans or access to capital we need. Well, I'm going to say this to you, Limitless Living. To some extent, that is true. But, what holds true now is that shouldn't be, because as these loans are out there and people are having access to capital, it's still in the Black community, the access to capital is little to none. That's the issue there. And and as you so rightly put it, a lot of us don't understand and didn't understand what it was like to build a business and to go and take out a business loan. A lot of us did not, but an enormous amount of us do now. And the same issue is still here. Now, as we were talking about the labor force and the labor disparities are even worse. Because why does Black unemployment always consistently rise to the top and nobody else? That's a problem. And we've got to figure out how to solve that. We've got to solve that, because right now, in these trying times here in 2026, we don't know what the outcome is going to be as we head down towards the end of the year. We should be doing this like yesterday. That means that we should be unifying and building, coming up with plans in our communities to make sure we build each and every community around this country. Each and every community. For me, that's disparaging. It's disappointing because there's a few of us that are actually trying this, trying to get out and trying to motivate and inspire to get people in our communities get out and do what they need to do. But a lot of people are just not listening. That's the issue with that. And I just really wish that we could do a whole lot better with this because we need to. Not because we have to. It's because we need to. And people are not looking at that need for what it is. So let's talk about the rising Black middle class under threat, because I think that's been taken down from a while ago when there was a Black middle class. It's no longer existent. It is no longer existent. There's a growing Black professional class, and it is real, but it is also fragile. One health crisis, one job loss, one predatory lending trap away from regression. Without a policy protection and community infrastructure, gains can be erased in a single generation. This means all of our young people are in harm's way. And we have to do something in order to change that. Because opportunity, for one, has to be there, but the innovativeness of these young people has got to be let out. It's got to be set free, because they've got to have the ability to go out to create and build and make a way that's going to provide work and jobs for those that really, really need them, especially in those underserved and marginalized communities. So I asked this question: when we talk about the rising Black middle class that's under threat, do you guys still see it as the same, or is that changing? Last point on this is I want to ask you guys to tell me, what does liberation look like? What does liberation look like? Because when we think about being liberated, there are so many things that we can do, but it seems like we're not taking advantage of it. We have to take advantage of these situations because, nobody's giving us anything, but those opportunities that are there that we see, we have to take advantage of those. We have to be opportunistic, and we have to force that action in order to make things happen. If we're not forcing the action, nothing's happening. And if nothing's happening, then what are we doing? Because that in itself is nonsensical. So when we talk about what liberation really looks like, economic liberation for Black America looks like community ownership, not just individual success. It looks like Black banks, Black investment funds, cooperative economics, and circulating dollars within Black communities before sending them out. Buy Black is not a slogan, it is a survival strategy. Why are we not keeping our money in our communities? Why are we not investing in our communities? When we're not investing in our communities, believe me, it gives people the opportunity. These local, county, and state governments and federal governments, they come in and they just gentrify our communities. take what they want. Take what they want at will. And when they take what they want, there's nothing stopping them because now it's too late. It's too late to stop them because they've already started it. And they've already started because nobody actually went down to see what the plans were for the city. But it's always a true fact to know this. Wherever there are Black communities, that property has got some real serious value to it, and it's always taken. And to let you know, and to give you some indication of this, I want you to, for those of you that are major sports fans, have you guys not noticed that all of these humongous football stadiums that they're putting up, they're putting them in Black communities, land that they've taken? It doesn't matter if it's a football stadium, a basketball arena, a hockey arena, a baseball field. They're doing baseball stadiums. They're doing all of this in the Black communities. And they're taking the land and nobody's doing anything about it. Now you have to think about one thing. These folk that we sit to these to either these state houses or the U.S. House and Senate to represent us, are they really representing us? This is where you got to think about your vote, because your vote means a whole lot. Somebody's got to know that we're not doing our due diligence. And who cares about some athlete that's got millions of dollars, or they signed these millions of dollar contracts? They have those contracts. Those contracts are for them. They're not coming back to invest in a community. They're not investing in a community. But you're taking your money and you're supporting what they're doing. Make that make sense to me, because that sounds really nonsensical. And what's the nonsensical part about that is that they know this, but they also know they've got so much good marketing that's putting them out that they know that exploiting you and taking your dollars is what it's all about. And you're giving them that money. You got to be smart. And I'm going to tell you this. As we understand from an economical perspective, that everything that's about being Black in America is trending against us when it comes to economics. And it's trending against us because there are too many folk, or there are too many of us that are thinking about an individual situation instead of a community situation. Nobody's thinking about building. Because if you thought about building, you would not let these damn people come into your community where you see folk running around now pushing strollers and running through your community, and you're looking like, well, where the hell did they come from? That's the beginning of the end, because that means that the gentrification is already in full throttle mode, which means that eventually in a 5-year period, you're going to be kicked out of your own community, because property taxes are going to go up, where you got all these fraudulent state governments that are doing anything and everything that's necessary to remove Black people from their communities. But then you also have people from Black communities that supposed to, quote unquote, say they've made it, that are talking against the Black community itself. Why are y'all afraid to call that out? Call it out, because it's serious and it's real. And we're in 2026, and you see what is actually happening right now this year, where most of you thinking about your vote not counting But you should be asking yourself, why are they trying to prevent you from voting? It's because there's power in voting. So I want to talk about education and the next generation because that's important. Frederick Douglass told us, once you learn to read, they can never enslave you again. And every force that has historically worked to suppress Black Americans has understood that truth better than some of us today. Again, and every force that has historically worked to suppress Black Americans has understood that truth about reading better than some of us today. Put it in a book. You're not going to read it. The battle over education, over what Black children learn, who teaches them, how they are treated when they walk into a classroom, is one of the most consequential battles of our time. In 2026, we're watching concerted, coordinated efforts to strip Black history from American curricula, to erase the legacy of slavery, of Reconstruction, of the Civil Rights Movement from the textbooks of the next generation. And I want to be very clear about what that is. It is not a curricular disagreement. It is an attempt to rob Black children of the knowledge of their own power. Because a child who does not know where they come from cannot know how far they can go. At the same time, our historically Black colleges and universities, our HBCUs, remain among the most transformative institutions in the history of American higher education. They produce a disproportionate share of Black doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, and business leaders. They're not just schools, they are sanctuaries of Black intellectual life, Black identity, and Black possibility. And they deserve every resource, every dollar of federal investment, and every ounce of public support this nation can give them. The fight for equitable education, from the kindergarten classroom to the HBCU campus, is a fight for the soul of the next generation. And on this show, we will always fight it. Because that's true. That is true. You see, it's like it's okay to sink all the dollars into PWIs. But when it comes to HBCUs, there's always a shortage when it comes to funding. Now, word of note, and this is a great note, I just read an article yesterday. HBCU enrollment in all of the HBCUs is up. It is up. Yes. But what you also need to know is that at Harvard, Yale, and Penn, enrollment is down. I want you to let that sink in. It's down. And the reason why it's down, and I'm quite sure they're still going to find a way to lure some of our children from these HBCUs with some kind of money, because it's always about the money. It's always about the money. We did a docu-series on changing trends and times when, that story that, the campaign of the NAACP about boycotting the SEC, the Big Ten, and these other major college football conferences. Our kids should be going to HBCUs. That's where they should be going. That's their rightful place. Because when people come and watch college football, they come to watch those young black boys that come from these underserved and marginalized communities. That's who they come to watch. But those very same programs, when we talk about the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12, they have not one time went to their state legislators to say anything about voting rights. They give less than a damn about the voting rights, because as long as they're building these 100,000 seat stadiums, they're building 100,000 seat stadiums. NIL deals are what they are, but the NIL deals are so good at the SEC and the Big Ten that they're proposing to pull away from the rest of college football and do their own thing. And that's what taking these young boys from these underserved and marginalized communities and say, hey, come play college football here. We got some money for you. You get some money, but you can't vote. Does that sound right? I mean, that's illogical. And that's about as nonsensical as it gets. How in the hell are you going to go because you say you want to get this money? So they're going to give you $3 million. That's your NIL deal. They give you $3 million. But you can't vote. Think about that. You can go and play college football and you can go to HBCU and you'll definitely go to the NFL. You'll definitely go to the NFL. Because as you go, they go. You don't need to go to a PWI. That's a lie about you need to go to Alabama. You need to go to Ole Miss. You need to go to Texas. You need to go to Auburn. You need to go to Arkansas. You need to go to Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Georgia. No, you don't need that. Go to the HBCU. Them same dollars going to follow you there. Them same dollars are going to follow you there. Don't go to those schools, because if they're not going to stand up for you, why are you letting them benefit off you? It does not make sense. And so many people are putting so much emphasis on money. Everything now is about money. If it's about money in that case, then I would say you hold the power. So if you hold the power, why are you not using it? Because they're not getting those dollars if you're not there. Go to an HBCU. Their enrollments are up, thank God, and I was glad to read that article. As a matter of fact, there's going to be more of a posting on that, because that's a really good thing to hear. And so when it's by the numbers, that's what makes it even better. So as we get into this educational part of this, we're going to first talk about the K-12 disparities. Schools in majority black zip codes are chronically underfunded compared to predominantly white districts. The disparity is per pupil spending. It's not a mystery. It is a choice. Property tax-based school funding is a structural inequity that must be reformed at the state and federal levels. So I want you to understand that. So if you're living in a predominantly white area, white zip code, and you're living in a predominantly black zip code, all of your tax dollars, the majority of your tax dollars, are being shifted from where you are to there. Plain and simple. Your tax dollars are being shifted from where you are to here. You need to raise a stink about that at your city council meetings. Go to the city council meetings and demand them that they show you the reports as to why it is that when they talk about property tax-based school systems, why your tax dollars cannot stay in your area to fund that school where you are. Hold their feet to the fire. because it is just unbelievable here in the 21st century that the books that what they call go into failing schools, the ones that they intentionally made a failing school. And they make you talk about that failing school instead of doing what's necessary to fix it. And so how they do that? They make those schools even worse because they create the charter schools. And the charter schools are taking all of the funding from that school, from the school that's in your area. And remember, when they make the charter school is still not in your zip code. The charter school is still way over here. But in order for your kid to get into that school, you got to be able to pass the test. You got to be able to pass the test. For your tax dollars. Instead of fixing your situation right where you are. These folk will never ever change. Stop saying that it's going to get better and that you have friends here and there, because your friends here and there are not doing it for you. You guys need to unite. Unite. We all have to unite. We have to build our community coalitions, and we need to connect them throughout this whole entire country. And we need to be on one accord with one plan that's going to work for everyone. And everyone must follow that plan. Everyone. And stop having folk telling you that you can't unite with too many black people, and all of a sudden you get scared because you say, oh, they're going to kill you. Really? I don't know. I'm really disappointed. You know, I'm really hurt that we've got so many people that are still not doing what they need to do in order to help in building our communities. Because we're about building our communities. And education and our kids for the next generation means more than anything. They are the real state of Black America. And if they're losing, then we've already lost. We can't have that. We've got to set this new standard, this real standard, a concrete standard that's going to build the education system for our kids to go forever and ever and ever and ever. That is the purpose of this ecosystem, is because as we do our history and our history is archived, believe me, that's going nowhere but here. Nobody else has access to that. They cannot change this history. So, I can tell you this. I know that there's a lot of folk that might not agree with what's being talked about. You might not agree, but the truth is just the truth. And instead of coming up with an excuse, come up with a solution, because we need to be solution based. We need to be solution based. So the school to prison pipeline. Black students are suspended and expelled at rates disproportionate to their share of student population. Zero tolerance policies that criminalize normal adolescence behavior have funneled generations of Black youth into the juvenile and criminal justice system. Dismantling the pipeline requires restorative justice practices, counselors over cops, and community-based discipline models. This is what we need to be talking about. Because again, this is another disruptor that's taking place in the education system that has no place of being there. Anytime you go to school, we know that the school has got what they call its rules and its regulations. But in that process, you don't actually have a focal and a moray where you enforce more of the rules and laws against one than you do the other. Because that right there in itself shows the inequities of the system. So again, there's more work that needs to be done. And as we talk about restorative justice is definitely what needs to happen. But as it happens, let me just tell you this. You know, it may be a tough thing, but if it's worth doing and there's results there, then that means it's worth having. So this is where we all, again, and I call it we, that's where unification comes in. There's no need to be afraid of what's real, because what's real is going to be. And if we continue to sit back and say, okay, well, this is how that works, well, we're just not going to worry about it, then it only brings on more and more problems. Because there ain't nothing that says that you have to sit back and you have to let all of this rule you and control you and have you saying that you're just not going to worry about this and it's just going to work itself out. That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. Because that's not even the way life works. And so the digital divide, despite the proliferation of technology, meaningful broadband access gaps persist in low-income, predominantly Black neighborhoods. In an area when quality education increasingly requires a reliable internet connection and a device, digital inequity is educational inequity, full stop. Plain and simple. Kids need a computer, they need strong internet. In those Black communities, low-income Black communities, there's a broadband issue. The fiber optics are not as good, or they're not actually getting through. The kids don't even have a device most of the time. So you got to do something about that. I really wish that this could be, that this was something that could actually take place that would do something real. What I do think is that when we have folk that refuse to understand what the truth is and don't want to hear the truth, that means that there's shame within you. And that shame within you is something that you can change. We can all change that. That's the purpose of having neighbors, having family and friends. It's all about reliability. And basically, what it says is that there's not a lot of reliability. And that in itself is a very sad thing, but it's true. But it's true. But it's true. And as we look again, I just hope and I always remain optimistic. I hope that as you go into, by the end of this year, that there is a change. I'm hoping and praying that there is a change. Because right now, I doubt very seriously the trajectory of where this country is going right now, that if it continues by the end of this year, if it's sustainable. It's already bad enough that the GDP is less than what the debt is. So that's telling you right there, that's a very deep problem. Black teachers matter. Research consistently shows that Black students who have at least one Black teacher are more likely to graduate and pursue higher education. Recruiting, retaining, and valuing Black educators is not just a diversity initiative. It is a proven evidence-based intervention. We must fight for it as though lives depend on it, because they do. And that's factual. They do. So we've got to do our part for that. And how we do that part? Again, we work together. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to work together because there's been several Black educators that I've run across that's actually been here on this show that always come with proven results, results driven, and having the real work done. Kudos to those teachers, because I really believe that as they go, our students go. As they go, our students go. The attack on Black history. The coordinated legislative effort to ban the teaching of critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and comprehensive African American history is an assault on truth. You cannot understand America without understanding the full story of Black America. The horror, the resistance, the triumph, and the ongoing struggle. Sanitized history produces citizens unprepared to build a just society. Now, how many of you were offended when they started banning books and pulling books out of these different schools? What did any of you have to think about when it comes to how this actually looked? As far as what you know of what you learned in school. How many of you thought and was looking and researching, trying to find out what is it that you can do in hopes that this didn't happen either in your state or in your school? Because when you see something like this and you're trying to keep me from learning my history, and you want to continuously tell me that the evolutionary theory was the real thing, and that Christopher Columbus discovered America, and there was nobody here, and he just came, and he just got whatever it was that he wanted to do. And so that in itself says to me that, when people are actually saying these things, and when they know that they're not right, and they know that that's not true, and they can't do this, why would they want to have the authority to take away Black history? Why? Why? Because you see, they're doing that because it's plain and clear that Black history is not only American history, it's world history. It's how you get here. It's how they got here. But banning books and changing the curriculum to take away everything that talks about Black history, I don't agree with that. None of us should, but it's true. This is the real truth. You all know that. So if you know that, then what do you do? What do you do? Do you come up with a system that maybe you can homeschool your child and you teach your child yourself? Or do you continuously let them go to a school that they're going to continue to take resources away from and make it a fail-safe system that they're happy with? Which is it? Because it all deserves to be talked about. It all deserves to be talked about. Because slavery was real. And that happened here in America. And the benefactors of that slavery for generational wealth that's taken place ever since slavery was there up until Reconstruction, they're still benefiting from that slave labor and from slavery. Same folk still benefiting. Yeah, you might not have done it, but you're benefiting from it, right? So as you benefit from it, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you? Because I doubt very seriously most of you that are benefiting from that are going to actually be honest enough to say that this was wrong. I should not have this. We should not have this. And this should be given back because that's all stolen. It's all stolen. And again, tough conversation, but the truth. But the truth. This is nothing but the truth. And I'm sorry if it hurts a lot of people, but it shouldn't hurt. What it should do is it should awaken your senses and your mind to say, we need to do something about this because this is wrong. But it starts at the very, very top. At the very, very top. And it flows down. So all of this learned behavior is just on a continuum. And this is what it gets us. This is what it gets us. So what the next generation needs most, they need mentors who look like them and believe in them. They need schools that are fully resourced, trauma-informed, and culturally affirming. They need to know their history in all its complexity and glory. And they need adults in this community, in this generation, to fight for them with the same ferocity that they fight for anything else they love. So now, this is where we need all people, all hands on deck, to come forward, mentor, and teach this new generation going forward what it is they need to know, what to do, how to do it, when to do it, why to do it, and why it is so important. We need that from everyone. From everyone. So, let's say we work on that and we make that happen. Can we do that? So, now we're going to talk about violence, safety, and community survival, because our communities have faced a lot of violence, they're unsafe, and the survival is definitely not been one of the highest parts of what's happening there. This is the part of the conversation that breaks my heart and steals my resolve at the same time. Because when we talk about violence in Black communities, we're not talking about statistics. We're talking about sons and daughters who did not come home. We're talking about mothers who have buried children they dreamed about since before they were born. We're talking about neighborhoods. We're talking about the sound of gunfire has become so ordinary that children no longer flinch. And that normalization itself is a form of trauma that will echo for generations. Community violence is a public health crisis, not a cultural one, not a moral one, a public health crisis rooted in concentrated poverty, disinvestment trauma, and the absence of the kinds of opportunity and support systems that make violence less likely to take root. This is the other truth, the one I want to lift. I want to lift up tonight with just as much force. The community is not waiting. All across Black America, there are men and women doing the hardest work imaginable, walking into the most dangerous corners, putting themselves between gunmen and bystanders, sitting with grieving families, mentoring the young men who the system has already written off, violence interrupters, credible messengers, community healers. These are the heroes of our time, not the ones on the news after something goes wrong. The ones show up every single day to prevent it. Tonight on this platform, those people deserve to be seen, celebrated, and funded because they are holding the line in ways that no government program could fully replicate. And that's because if it's all necessary, is to create violence and stir up violence in Black communities has always been that. And so creating that violence and making it be the same thing over and over again makes it cyclical, but it also puts it to the point that this is never ending. It's never ending because we're not there doing our full due diligence. No matter what community we live in, all communities have to be safe. We have to make our community safe. We don't need no one else to do that. We can do that. So, in saying that, community violence is a public health crisis. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention classifies community violence as a public health issue requiring public health solutions. Prevention, early intervention, treatment, and long-term recovery. Policing alone has never solved violence. It never will. Investment in community infrastructure is the medicine. So, with that being said, and knowing that there's a lack of resources and there's mass confusion all over the place, and people are just doing different things in a lot of our communities. How should we work on making this a better place, making things a whole lot safer for people in all of our communities? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We've got to do something about this because the violence is just overwhelming. It is overwhelming. And so as it's overwhelming, it's causing problems for everybody. We've got to do a whole lot better because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're not giving our people an opportunity to survive and to live happy, thriving lives like they all deserve. Nobody deserves to lose a life. Nobody deserves to be tormented. Nobody deserves to be tortured. We've got to change this. And this is all part of a system that's so rotted out until it's just not funny. It's rotted completely out. And the things that are transpiring today are things that transpired back in the 1950s and 60s. This and these are the things that make this even worse. I know there's not many of us that are for things like this, but we have to do something about this. Because, I think that just as it comes down to this, I think everybody knows that the systemic issue that's here is here, but it's not that because it's here that it should continue to do what it's doing. These are some things that we have to let this be known at any time. It matters not where, when, or how, but this all needs to be revealed. And we have to let people know how we feel because we don't like that. But because we don't like it, that don't mean that it's going to stop. But we have to do what we need to do. So my thing is, as this is going on, we've got to make things better for ourselves. So I'm asking you all, let's come up with a plan so we can make this happen. Let's talk about these gun violence statistics. Black Americans are disproportionately affected by gun violence. Black men between the ages of 15 and 34 face homicide rates that are tragically elevated compared to the generation population, a gap driven by disinvestment and concentrated disadvantages, not by any characteristic of Black people themselves. We must peace. We must be precise about causes and resist the urge to make pathologically the victims. So we've got to do what we got to do when we talk about this gun violence, because we don't need guns all over the place in every community. And they just pop up and all of a sudden people are just being shot for no reason. That's not a good thing. I know it's not everybody, but still, it's one of those things that just not needed. Because I think there's every individual that's seen something of the sort of this on their television can say one thing, and that is this was a great person, and it's too sad and too bad that they lost their lives. So, as we get to the trauma part, trauma, poverty, and violence. The intersection is not accidental, it is casual. Persistent poverty produces chronic stress. Chronic stress produces community-level trauma. Unaddressed trauma, in the absence of healing resources, increases the likelihood of violence. Break one link in that chain with jobs, with housing, with counseling, with mentorship, and the entire chain weakens. That is something that would definitely disrupt that. But how do we make that part happen? Because it definitely deserves to be gone. This is really sad to even talk about this, because when you think about the Black community, there's so much trauma in an already impoverished area, and then you got violence on top of that. That's doing the same thing on top of each other over and over and over and over again. And this is why so many kids have PTSD. This is why so many younger adolescents have PTSD. It's because you never know what's going to happen. You just never know. So, with that being said, what communities, not just governments, can do? Communities cannot wait for government to solve what government has, in many cases, helped create. Block clubs, peace walks, community fridges, mentorship programs, faith-based outreach, youth employment initiatives. These are not supplements to real solutions. They are real solutions, and they work when they are resourced and respected. That's right there for me. That's more internal than anything. That's more internal than anything. We can fix this. We can fix this. We all just have to unify together, come up with that plan and make it happen. Because if it was, because if people wanted to sit around and rely and wait on the government to help you, that's the wrong thing. Because the government will just let you go ahead and kill yourself and take all the property. So what do? I think this right now is the time that we have to do all the things within our power that we can control, and that we have all of the main we got all of the necessary things in play to make this a right. Because this in itself said so many things that it basically is like, it's all of this, but you're trying to make it this, and you can't, because it's out of control. And with it being out of control like this, it's not going to be one of those things that we'll be able to reel in. But I think optimism means everything. Optimism means everything. When you can wake up and you can go and do your day-to-day basis and do all those things that you need to do, your life is a whole lot better. It's the times that you are not able to do that. So we have to be able to work through these situations where, we have to come up with community leaders that are able to make things do what they have to do. So let me this last thing here about this role of mentorship and intervention, because I think it's very important for all of our communities, because we have to establish mentorships, and do interventions to make sure that we keep people on an even keel, to keep people feeling secure, and making people want to do the things that they feel like they need to do. Evidence-based violence intervention programs, hospital-based violence intervention, group violence intervention, outreach and community mediation have documented track records of reducing shootings. These programs need sustained funding, not one-time grants that expire before their impact can compound. So, when you talk about mentorship programs, there's a lot of us, that includes myself. We need to be mentoring our young youth, our next generational youth. We need to be mentoring and having them set and ready to go to do the things that we know they can do. We've got to be able to inspire these young people and motivate these people to do all the good things that we know they can do. And we can do those things. We can do those things like it's nothing. Because let me tell you, as you know, we put out different things. You know, we're trying to establish what a mentorship program looks like here on this platform, because we want to have mentors that are going to be able to collaborate and work with several different organizations, community-based organizations, that deserve and need this kind of help in order to build a stronger infrastructure around community. And so let me tell you what my personal call to action is. My personal call to action is this. I'm asking every person watching tonight to do something. Not a big thing, something. Check on the young man in your neighborhood who seems lost. Volunteer at a mentorship program. Donate to a local organization doing intervention work. Show up. Because the alternative, doing nothing while our communities bleed, is not an option. I'm not willing to accept that. I'm not. And I do not believe you are either. So let's do these collaborations. Let's work with these organizations that actually are going to be putting out some things and they want to do some things. You know, you guys can reach out and, you know, we could work on some things together as well. But we've got to come up with a plan that's going to do what's necessary to save our communities. We have to unify, because I want you to, if you think about those last few things, those last few points that I went through, those have to be heartbreaking when you just think about this, because it's the same thing that's being perpetuated, and it's being perpetuated because it's being considered as normalized status quo behavior. I don't agree with that. We've come too far, and we're doing too many good things to continuously let the culture of what we bring to this world go down. We're creating too much in innovation and entrepreneurship to let everything go by the side and do nothing. Because things in our communities, if they're not changing, something's wrong. But the question I'm asking again, what are we going to do about it? I mean, we have to get together and we have to do something. So we've got to do a really big collaboration. But we've got to come down with a real, and I mean a real, program that's going to do what's necessary to help these young people in our communities. I am all about community. I am all about safety. I'm all about culture. I'm all about education. I'm all about upward mobility. I am all about entrepreneurship. I'm all about economic development. I'm about education. I'm about all those things. But don't unfairly make it a disproportionate situation that I can't learn or it's not accepted for what has happened or transpired to me, my community, and my people to go forward. No, that's not going to happen. And I just say that if there's anything that we need to do is we need to work together, because we need to stop this before it really turns into obliteration. And that is what I think is the real goal, is to totally destroy all of our communities. I'll tell you this. There's a whole lot more to cover, but I think I've said enough to light a fire, and I want to see it burn, because we can do what we need to do together. I'm here, I'm willing and able to work with anybody. So, till then, I'm going to say, I want you all to have a really, really great evening. Have a really great evening. And I will see you all tomorrow night for another great episode of America in Black and White. And I'm your host, Charles